What's up, y'all? You're listening to the Extra Point College Football Podcast. I'm your host, Jacob Carnes, joined as always by my co-host, Daniel Hammock. Daniel, we are, as we sit here and record, 20 days from week 0. So we're recording on Sunday, August 7th. 20 days into week 0, man. We have real college football coming up in less than 3 weeks. We've already seen an NFL preseason game, which is not college football, but it is live football with real players. And, you know, it's preseason games are fun, especially because as a college football fan, we get to see some of these draft picks for the first time in their NFL uniform. So I like to say the preseason a little bit more for college football fans as well, just like the draft is. Ton of fun. Daniel, we're going to talk about the best units in college football. So position groups. We got, 3 best for each position group in college football that we're going to talk about. But, man, we are so close to playing some games.
Yeah, I'm excited. I think that it's funny because it's perfect that these games that would get overshadowed in week 1 get pushed to week 0, because I would never watch Nebraska and Northwestern during week 1 because of how many other games are going to be better than it. But you can catch me on my couch on week 0 watching Nebraska Northwestern at noon or whatever it is. I think that's what it is on Fox. And then like Vanderbilt in Hawaii. This might be the only Vanderbilt game I watch in its entirety all year. And Vanderbilt goes to Hawaii. So,
I mean, at noon, we've got Austin Peay at Kentucky, Western Kentucky, excuse me.
I'm about to say,
I'll be watching that. Yeah, not Kentucky.
Western you get Kentucky. Your first look at Florida State, and they're going to play Duquesne. So
Duquesne, spelled not Duquesne. So if you try to search that, good luck.
I had to help you, Jacob. Yeah, DeQuincy.
North Texas at UTEP. That'll be a great game. Wyoming at Illinois.
Yeah.
So, look, if you think for 1 second of skipping out on Charlotte at FAU, you're wrong.
Yeah, nothing coming, but
it's college football and it's real.
Oh yeah,
I'm watching it.
It's great. So worth it.
Let's dive in. We have done all of our conference previews. If you haven't heard those, go to our Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube channel. On YouTube, we actually have a playlist. But go find your team. Go find your conference and division. And we recorded a podcast on it. So we previewed every Power 5 team as well as about 10 Group of 5 teams. So, hey, 75 teams with your previews on. A lot of hard work. We wrapped it up last week. Now let's talk about nationally, what are the best position groups in college football? We talk about doing an All-America team, which we're going to get to highlight some players as we talk about this. But I like doing position groups because I think it gives you a really good picture of how talented and how deep teams are at certain positions. And hey, if your team's on this list, could you have an advantage over other teams on your schedule? Now, we picked the top 3 for each position group. We'll talk about some teams that might have gotten left off. Let us know if you agree or disagree. If you are on YouTube, be sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel. You can hit that notification bell, get notified whenever a new video drops. We'll be dropping 2 a week throughout the regular season. If you're on Apple Podcasts on Spotify, be sure to leave us a 5-star review. Daniel, let's start with quarterback. So quarterback, most important position in football, right? Who have the top 3 position rooms, quarterback rooms in college football? We came up with 3. Alabama, I mean, hard to argue with the Heisman winner, right? Ohio State, and then Michigan. So we got 2 Big Ten teams, one from the SEC, has the Heisman winner and Bryce Young. But any highlights in our best quarterback rooms?
Well, I think the top 2 are obvious for obvious reasons. Me and you were both, when we were putting this list together, both had both of them. And I felt like I was going to edge Ohio State over Alabama when we first talked, because I'm really high on Kyle McCord. And we were talking back and forth, and I was like, I mean, who do you like better, Jalen Milroe or Kyle McCord? And you said, honestly, it's close for me. And then I just started doing a little mental exercise, and I was like, I'm completely forgetting about Ty Simpson for Alabama. And that, of course, tilts the scales in their favor. Just we're talking about the whole room. And obviously, even if you just had, Bryce and CJ Stroud as just a wash, because they're both elite dudes who are competing for the Heisman and potential national championship this year. It's like you start looking at the entirety of the room. That's kind of where you come to. And then obviously, with Michigan, we're both high on JJ McCarthy and Kaden McNamara returns. So you're just kind of, two good quarterbacks. It's a good competition.
That's what I wanted to highlight is Kaden McCarthy and Kaden McNamara and JJ McCarthy. I think that's an interesting one because I think that might be the best 1-2 punch in college football. Obviously, Kaden McNamara, known as the more game manager of the two. JJ McCarthy, former 5-star, has the higher ceiling. I'll be curious to see which one starts this year. I mean, Harbaugh has kind of stayed with, McNamara hasn't lost his job, and the plan is to play both again. It actually works really well for them last year. I thought they did. It's hard to make a 2-quarterback system work. They made it work last year. Harbaugh did a really good job managing both of them. The fact that he's kept them both on the roster past the transfer portal window, I think is really important. So they're one that'll highlight. I'm curious to see who wins that job, and I'm curious to see if they run the full season with both quarterbacks again. So that highlights our quarterback room. I can't think of any teams that got left off. Can you think of anyone that we left off that would have been like in the running?
No one that was very
Close.
proven. I mean, there's some deep teams like,
And Georgia's deep.
Georgia's deep. I would say Texas A&M. I feel like is deep, but there's no
LSU?
starter. They're deep. I would still say they're deep. I don't think that you'd classify them just because I don't think Jaden Daniels has done that or Miles Brennan.
You know who could make this list? Clemson? Does DJU get back to being DJU?
I think that one of them would have had to have been elite at this point. If DJU had a great year last year, they would be on this list because
they might be on this list next offseason.
They could be. Yeah, I don't know. I think that, it's like you can always think about in this era. I mean, depending on what you think about Quinn Ewers, Texas, because Hudson Card's still there, but it's tough. When you think through it.
Speaking of Texas, let's talk about running backs. So best running back rooms in college football. Our top 3, Daniel. Texas at 1, Ohio State at 2, Ole Miss at 3. I will highlight Texas. Texas has 4 players that averaged at least 6 yards a carry last year, returning this year. These are all 4- and 5-star backs. Bijan Robinson, I think, is the best running back in the country. Asterisk of, I think you could argue TreVeyon Henderson, and I will hear you out and probably agree with you. I think flip a coin there, depending on the day. I will lean Bijan for now. But so Texas, I thought was a clear-cut number 1 for me. Ohio State at 2. Daniel, you're the one who, when I sent you my suggestions, pushed for Ole Miss. Talk me through Ole Miss. I thought that was really interesting. And then once I broke it down, I was like, for sure they need to be included on this list. So talk to me about Ole Miss.
Yeah, I like them at 3 specifically because I do agree you and I are both high on those first 2 being those premier selections. Ole Miss, it's funny because they lose Snoop Connor and Jerry and Ely, who were very productive last year in this offense. Both go to the NFL draft or graduation, and you're kind of left wondering what they're going to do. And then they get 2 transfers, and they were both starters where they were, and you end up getting Ulysses Bentley the 4th, who was a stud for SMU. He was averaging under 6 yards a carry. Great production as far as touchdowns go, everything of the sort, and 1,000-yard back used the past 2 seasons. And he's a junior. And then you also get Zach Evans, who's a former number 1 overall player, who was the best running back, of course, when he came out. He goes to TCU, averages 7 yards a carry, but is kind of in a mix of other running backs in the backfield. So he's ready to be more of a feature back. And also with Gary Patterson no longer being the head coach, I think there's just enough turnover for them to for him to seek elsewhere. So he comes to the SEC, gets to play in the conference he had originally committed to, and so now you've got 2. I mean, I think you've got one that's just like a flash in the pan, could be a generational guy, and Zach Evans if he does things the right way, and then I think you've got a bell cow in Ulysses Bentley, where I think that he's the biggest insurance policy, because if Zach Evans, who is up and down, could have an up and down season. You got Ulysses Bentley, who has proven that he can do it year in, year out. And, you know, in the SEC, you need two backs, and they've got two.
Zach Evans, Heisman sleeper. Again, the numbers he's going to be able to put up in this offense. Now, I don't know if a running back's going to win one for a long time, but hey, that'd be a fun number to go get because the odds are probably very, very long right now. All right, that's running backs. And we combine wide receiver and tight end right here. Pass catchers is what we're doing here. So I think number one's not going to surprise a lot of people. Number two might. We're going to get number one, Ohio State. Yep. Number two, Georgia. Number three, USC. So, I mean, Ohio State. I'll talk a little bit about Ohio State. I'll throw it to you, Daniel. I mean, 5 stars and 5 stars and 5 stars. Their 3 starting wide receivers this year are going to be 2 5-stars and a 4-star. Obviously, we saw Jackson Smith-Njigba in the Rose Bowl have a record-setting performance.
Right.
Julian Fleming has not seen the field a ton. He is now a junior. So Julian Fleming was actually the highest rated of the receivers that are on this roster. We've yet to see him pop. Marvin Harrison Jr., Jaden Bullard, Caleb Burton. You know, they've got some great guys in the 2023 class, but I won't count those in this. Brian Hartline's putting together just stacks on stacks on stacks at receiver at Ohio State. I love their tight end, Cade Stover. And speaking of tight ends, I mean, is that what really puts Georgia in this group, or is Georgia also deep at receiver?
So they're talented and deep at tight end.
Yeah.
But yeah, receiver, I think that people are forgetting how much last year developed Georgia's receivers as a whole. You've got A.D. Mitchell, who, had the big play in the national championship game, but had several big plays throughout the season. He's kind of their number one as far as the receivers go. And then, you've just got like a plethora of just 4 and 5-star guys who are either coming back from injury or have played a lot, but maybe have been overlooked. So it's just a talented group. A guy I'll highlight is at least Aryan Smith, who is a track guy who his average catch, I think, is a touchdown at this point because he keeps catching 30, 40, and 50-yard bombs for touchdowns just because he can get behind anybody. But he has just kind of stayed hurt each of the past couple seasons. So he hasn't had a full season go at it. But I mean, the reason they're here on the list is definitely because tight ends. I think that they are a top 5 group when it comes to wide receivers, but they are a top 1 group of 1 for tight ends.
And it's not close.
No. It's when they got Arik Gilbert last year, transferred over, I thought, okay, that's pretty good. Darnell Washington's pretty good. We'll see what is going to happen. Brock Bowers somewhat comes out of nowhere and is the best tight end in the country. So now you got Brock Bowers as your lead guy, Darnell Washington, who's a phenomenal, blocker because of his size, but then is a phenomenal athlete as well. So he's the best of both worlds. And then Arik Gilbert coming in, and here's Oscar Delp, who looks like a prototype of Brock Bowers and what he just did as far as his skill set. So they really legitimately are 4 deep. And I think they've got 4 tight ends that could start on virtually any other roster in the country.
I mean, it's a shame that the Mackey Award didn't go to Brock Bowers last year. That is just, the voters deserve to be kicked off of voting forever. That tight end was stupid. Think about this. Brock Bowers obviously was the best tight end in the country last year. The number 1 and number 2 rated tight ends from the 2020 class are both on this roster now. Like, it was widely known that, hey, Arik Gilbert and Darnell Washington were not going to play together. They were going to go to different schools. Now they're the only 2 5-star tight ends in that class. They're both on this roster.
They were recruited as athletes to start with, both of them, because they both play defensive end, and they both committed to playing tight end at the next level, and they were both 1 and 2. Insane.
And then, of course, USC, highlighted by a new transfer, Jordan Addison, Biletnikoff Award winner from Pitt. Mario Williams transfers over from Oklahoma. Him and Caleb Williams, I think that's going to be a great connection this year. Mario Williams might be the most talented of them all, for being honest. Malcolm Epps, I'll highlight as well. USC's got a deep receiver room, and they had it before Lincoln got there. Lincoln is brought in, put the icing on the cake, bringing in Mario Williams and Jordan Addison, who will start. That's a loaded room. Offensive line. So Michigan won the Joe Moore Award last year for best offensive line. They are on our list at number 2. Number 1, Georgia. So Georgia at 1, Michigan 2, Oregon at 3. Daniel, what are your highlights from this group?
I think just Georgia, they have been stockpiling 5 stars on this roster. And Kirby Smart, when he first came in, highlighted the offensive line as a big area that he's, it's one of his main focuses. And so that's an area where they keep getting 5-star talent. And so I think actually the departure of a couple of the guys that were on the offensive line last year who were experienced might lead to a more talented offensive line playing. And you've just got 4 guys already, you've got 5 guys on this offensive line already who have started games consistently. But Georgia's walking into this with their most talented players being their left tackle, their center, and their right tackle, and they're all pretty much figured out. And at this point, they're just having about 10 guys who are really talented jockey for those 2 guard spots. So I think whoever starts for Georgia is going to be the right answer. And you're going to see kind of a maturation of this offensive line this year, especially with what the offense is doing, where they're returning a bunch of players. But yeah, this offensive line is deep and talented.
What about Oregon?
Oregon, they have 2. Is Alex Forsyth is the center, and I forget the right tackle's name, but they have 2 guys who are on all conference lists and all American lists. So both of them made it for us.
Definitely in one of those situations where Mario was stockpiling talent on both lines at Oregon. Definitely did not leave the cupboard empty there. One thing I'll highlight, so Michigan, I'll highlight Zach Zenter. Obviously, they won the Joe Moore Award last year. They bring back almost everybody to that Joe Moore Award-winning offensive line. Georgia, one thing I'll highlight is we talked about this with our SEC East preview, is that it seemed like everybody was in the transfer portal looking for offensive tackles, and Georgia actually had too many, so that 1 5-star went into the portal, came back, and is still not going to start in Amarius Mims. So the plethora of talent they have at tackle, especially when it seems like everybody was looking for a tackle, is impressive. So Georgia, Michigan, Oregon for offensive line. And that wraps up offense. Let's go over the defensive side of the ball, Daniel. We'll start back on the line. Defensive line, best 3 units for the DL in 2022. We're going with Clemson, Alabama, and Georgia. Probably no surprises on that list. Definitely the 3 teams that have recruited the best on the defensive line. Clemson, I could talk ad nauseum about. What highlights do you want to hit with this defensive line groups, Daniel?
Yeah, I think the important thing with Clemson is just that they are coming back from injury. So we have to, with Brian Bresee and just guys of that nature, we think that they're going to shouldn't be any issues going forward. The talent and the depth, they had it last year. So this is kind of a money year for them. And they tend to, be there every year. Important call out though is for Alabama. While this is where we have them because of the talent on that defensive line, this does not include Will Anderson and Dallas Turner because they are still considered linebackers. So that was something that actually was trouble for me when I was trying to account for it, because I'm like, both of them are rushing the passer. That should count as part of the defensive line, and they're still ranked 2nd without those 2.
Yeah, you're spoiling our linebacker picks, Daniel. No one's gonna be surprised when Bama's won at linebacker. Clemson, Xavier Thomas, Rook, Brian Bresee, Miles Murphy. Those are just the starters. They've recruited and developed as well as anyone else in the country at this position. You can do a lot with a good defensive line. This is one of those defensive lines that they will be able to get pressure with the 4, which really, really helps your defense out, especially if you have weakness in the secondary. You can cover it up when you're getting pressure with the 4. I think that's similar to Georgia last year. I don't necessarily think secondary was a weakness. It was a weaker part of that defense in the front 7. But when you're getting home with 4, really, really helps your secondary out. You're able to put a lot more coverage out there. So Clemson's going to be able to do that just fine this year. Georgia, here's the thing. Number 1, Jalen Carter, best defensive tackle in the country. And they just keep doing it, Daniel. there's 5 stars who've been waiting to play. They might have lost 5 first-round picks out that defense, but I don't think Georgia's going to be hurting for talent on defense. So that'll be something to look out for this year. Let's go to linebacker. We've already mentioned it, but Alabama number 1 at linebacker, Georgia at 2, Oregon at 3. I mean, Will Anderson and Dallas Turner is one of the best pass rushing duos we've seen in a long time in college football. And the fact that, Dallas Turner was a true freshman last year.
Yeah.
He'll be a sophomore this year. They're so good that a 5-star left the program and is going to go start at Arkansas and Drew Sanders and be like a spine of that defense in the middle with Bunker
Right.
Poole. Speaks to the level of talent in this linebacker room. So I'm really, really impressed with Alabama. Oregon as well. Noah Sewell and Justin Flo. A mean duo, middle linebacker. I think Georgia has more talent, at least more proven talent on the outside linebacker, similar to Alabama, than they do on the inside. What are your highlights for linebacker?
Yeah, and then, with Alabama obviously included in this would be Henry To'o, who 4th-year guy, started first 2 years at Tennessee, last year at Alabama, and then will be this year at Alabama. So NFL guy who decided to come back, wanted another shot at it. I think he would have been drafted in the middle rounds last year. He's probably looking at maybe becoming a first-round pick with another good year in this defense. I don't think it can hurt. And yeah, Will Anderson, freak, best player on the planet is what I want to say, but in the conference or in the nation. But Dallas Turner, someone who, we talk about jumps from year 1 to year 2 being the biggest. His was almost already part of last year where he made the jump mid-season to being that starter. So I'm just curious if he's going to have another jump between last year and this year, because if he does, you might have 2 Will Andersons on your hands, which is insane to think about. And then, yeah, Georgia, a ton of talent, but definitely that developed talent is on the outside. So interested to see how that goes, and really interested to see what Dan Lanning does at Oregon with those linebackers, because that's what he's known for at Georgia was his linebackers. And so he's coming into Noah Sewell and
Talent.
Justin Flo and being able to just go sideline to sideline with 2 guys and disguise things. And, it'll be interesting. So definitely a great problem to have if you're Dan Lanning with all that talent.
I think Oregon's got the best 1-2 punch at inside linebacker in the country. That's nasty. Let's go to defensive back. So whole defensive backfield here, secondary. Our top 3 were Georgia, Alabama, and Texas A&M. So 3 SEC teams, but again, they have recruited the best on the secondary. What are your highlights with defensive back?
Yeah, so for Georgia, looking at Keely Ringo coming back and kind of being that stalwart on one side, they're going to have to find out who they've got on the other side. Georgia may have just signed the best defensive back class ever with 3 5-stars in the secondary and 2 highly rated 4-stars added to that, and then another 4-star to go with it. So it's just like, and then a guy reclassified that was probably going to be a 5-star next year. He's just going to be a 4-star in this class. So that class isn't playing this year. They're just the depth. So that's the big key with Georgia is we believe that, Chris Smith coming back, Keely Ringo coming back, and then some guys that we may have forgotten about like Kamari Lassiter or Nyland Green. Yeah, and then Tyke Smith, who was injured last year, who was a previous All-American at a nickel/safety spot. those guys are all going to be there to be the starters and the ones that play all season. And then you've got that defensive back class of the century just waiting in the wings as the backups. So that's the big thing. Alabama, obviously, plenty of talent, plenty of guys returning, but maybe a little thinner than Georgia, which was the nudge there. Jordan Battle, though, All-American safety. Excited to watch him this season. And, they're going to – I mean, Eli Ricks transferring in, that's something that I forgot about, not long ago. It's something I have to keep reminding myself that, I still think about him at LSU being a 5-star. He hasn't really lived up to that yet, but usually it's tough for a young defensive back to do that. So he's coming in, and I think that all of it's going to kind of come together for Bama in that secondary as well.
A&M, I'll highlight. A&M's got some guys who, again, have been young. They've recruited very well in the defensive backfield. You got they're not related, but I see the Jones bros at corner. Miles Jones and Jalen Jones, then Damani Richardson and Antonio Johnson playing at safety. I think you could argue their starters are as good as anyone, but again, depth being where Georgia and Bama are deeper. Georgia significantly deeper in the secondary. A&M's gonna have a mean secondary. Again, you and I were talking before we recorded. We picked A&M to go 10-2. You and I both did, and I think pieces like their secondary give me confidence that this is going to happen, because when you stockpile talent like this, it's eventually going to click, and they've definitely stockpiled talent in the defensive backfield. Last but not least, special teams. So special teams doesn't have, it has an effect on the game, not like the other position groups do, but it can give you an edge. So who has the best special teams units in the country? This was more nuanced because it's like, do you just go kicker, or, teams like Alabama and Georgia who just play their 5-star freshmen on special teams? Is that the best? But, we landed on 1, Michigan, 2, Ohio State, 3, Texas A&M for a few specific reasons. So obviously Michigan and Ohio State have phenomenal kickers. A&M, I'll highlight their return game, but Daniel, what stuck out to you for special teams?
Yeah, I think that Michigan has good kicker punter combo, and that was just on a whole. You want to, if you have both of those and you have pretty good talent, like you've been recruiting well, you can usually average out to have good special teams, because you're playing those players, that are your depth players usually on special teams. Now, there are teams that tend to play their starters. Those tend to be the best teams on special teams, and I think that that's A&M with that return game. You and I were actually talking about this with Devon Achane being the RB1, being the starter now with Isaiah Spiller being gone. Are they going to still expect him to be the lead kick returner? And most places are saying that he will. He was very good at that position last year. So if he is, I really like that return game coming back as well. Big on field position, everything like that. Something we mentioned was maybe he will be the main guy, but maybe they don't do it all the time with him since he's going to be the main running back. Maybe it's just like as needed, like start the game in the half. Maybe if there's a big kick return that's needed or something, but in between, maybe, they've got so many athletes now that they just keep recruiting. So maybe they work someone else in. But I definitely think that whoever it is, they're going to have plenty to run behind with how good they were last year.
And A&M too, I'll highlight Aryan Smith as well. Their return game was just ridiculous. They've got some phenomenal skill players. That's what got them on the list for me. Was, their return game was as reliable as anybody in the country last year. They were liable to return one every single time they touched the ball. So I'll be curious how much they play this year. But yeah, Michigan, obviously highlighted by Jake Moody. He's probably the best kicker in the country. Ohio State has phenomenal kicker punter combo, and then A&M, great punter, but that return game really highlighting that their special teams for me. Daniel, I'm looking. I see a lot of common denominators. We look at all these teams. I'm trying to think who has the most their team name the most on here. Is it going to shock you, Daniel? But Ohio State, Alabama, and Georgia sure do have a lot of position groups in the top 3 for us. I mean, Ohio State, Alabama, Georgia, or the field. Who are you taking for the Natty this year?
I mean, that's easy. I think it's going to be from that first group. I do like that the field would include teams like, Texas A&M and Clemson. I do think that those, at least decent options. I think Clemson has a great shot to make it to the playoff. But those other 3 teams are in the playoff, in my opinion. So, if I get to pick 3 out of the 4 teams in the playoff, I'll take 3 of those teams. It's just going to break for one of those teams. So it's never exactly how you predict it. It looks very obvious that one of those 3 teams is going to be the national champion this year, but things happen. Ohio State looked great last year, lost to Oregon. Things like that are going to occur where you're like, I didn't see that coming. So something like that's going to happen to one of those teams. It's never going to be as perfect as we think, but with those 3 teams, someone's going to win it.
I'm with you, man. Well, hey, did we leave off your team? Did we get these top 3 units at every position group wrong? Let us know. Leave a comment down below if you're watching this on YouTube. Leave us a 5-star review and tell us how wrong we are in Apple Podcast. Follow us on social media. You can follow us at the Extra Point Pod on Facebook and Instagram. Let us know how right or wrong we are there as well. But you can follow him on Twitter at Deep South Daniel. You can follow me on Twitter at Jacob Carnes with a K. We will be back next week with our preseason XBR. So our in-house rating system, our top 25. We're combining we combine a lot of different stuff with our numbers, trying to get really the best 25 teams in the country based on how they've played in the season. But obviously this is preseason. So we're going to drop that next week, right before the AP poll drops next Monday. We're getting close, y'all. But that will do it for this edition of The Extra Point. He is Daniel. I'm Jacob.